What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now Plus. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about the Square Enix Astrobot situation. Now, this is a few days old, but I had to throw my hat into the arena here because, honestly, I just think it's such a bad idea. It's such a mistake. Now, I like Square Enix. They are one of my favorite publishers. I mean, I grew up on Kingdom Hearts. I mean, that's one of my favorite franchises of all time. More recently, I've kind of gotten more into Final Fantasy, and I adore that too. So, I mean, this is not like an anti, they don't have they don't have the look sometimes that Ubisoft gets, the corner of your eye and stuff. I really, really like Square Enix. And, they've had some trouble recently, with the first party versus third party kind of thing, or being exclusive, kind of being kind of just open to doing whatever. And maybe that has to do with this, right? So, I mean, catching you guys up in case you haven't seen it, right? You go through Astrobot, and amazing game, game of the year kind of potential type game, and there's so many different bots, and there's none from Square Enix. Now, the Buster Sword was in Astro's Playroom, okay? You had the sword, Cloud Sword, but you didn't have Cloud himself, Aerith, Tifa. I mean, you can immediately kind of go to that Final Fantasy VII cast. It's also relevant in terms of, current time, right, with what they're doing with the remakes. So those would probably be, the top three, the Cloud, Aerith, Tifa, and then I think to Kingdom Hearts. Now, you would not, I think, do, the Donald, Goofy, Mickey. I mean, those are Disney characters just in general. I think that'd be way too complicated, and you'd have to go through Disney. I wouldn't even want to attempt that, if I was a Sobi. But Sora. And, when you think about Kingdom Hearts in general, you think about Kingdom Hearts 1, Kingdom Hearts 2. And, in a way, those games were also birthed on the PlayStation the same way that Final Fantasy in a lot of ways was, right? So I think in terms of that respect and the lineage and the history, these are no-brainers. These are easy ones. Now, again, you really can only do original Kingdom Hearts characters like Sora, Riku, Kairi. And then Final Fantasy, again, I think you target that Cloud era Tifa. They're not in the game. And, the idea when the game came out was, okay, well, who's to blame? Who do we blame for this? I never actually thought it was Team Asobi, the makers of this game. I always assumed, because they talked to, the director of Astrobot a few weeks before. There was a few times that he was asked, and I remember in one interview, he said there were a handful of characters that they wanted that were said no to. But most times, when they were to go out and they asked people, they approved it immediately. So, was Square Enix one of those? And now you had kind of a direct line of questioning, and he said it's hard to comment on why Square Enix didn't approve the cameo. However, we do respect the choice of each publisher. And I mean, that's not offensive. That's not, that's not like hitting the ball in their court. I mean, in a way, maybe it is, but it's not aggressive. This is not an aggressive answer, but it actually gives us what we need to know, because there was still a little bit of debate, but I think the idea was, I think we all knew, right? They asked and Square Enix said no. Now we get the confirmation Square Enix literally rejected it. And I think the question was specifically on Cloud. So I'm pretty sure somebody asked about Cloud, and when he talked about, the rejection, he's also specifically talking about Cloud. So now we get to the part of well, why? Why would you do something like this? I saw a theory. I saw one theory online that I actually kind of like, and it's that maybe Square Enix doesn't want that first-party association with PlayStation anymore. And I thought, you know what? That's interesting. I don't know if it's true, and I'll tell you why. Don't know if it's true because the third part of Final Fantasy's remake, right, Final Fantasy VII, I think it's still going to be PlayStation exclusive. I think it's going to be awkward. I think it's going to be weird because you're having all of their games come to, all the consoles, all the different platforms. And, by the time Part 3 comes out, I personally believe at least 16 will be on Xbox, even though right now, PlayStation and PC. And I also think kind of down the line, they will put all three of the remakes, Part 1, 2, 3. They'll put it maybe in a collection of some sort, and they'll put it on Xbox too. But I do think at launch, it'll be only on PS5/PS6. And I bring that up because that's kind of the only thing you could say against this theory. But I do I like it. I like the idea. Well, I don't necessarily I think Cloud should have been in the game. Okay, so I'm not a fan of that. But I like that line of thinking where it's Square Enix is trying really, really hard to not necessarily distance themselves from PlayStation, but kind of maybe seem more approachable. You know what I mean? To seem more open to the other consoles, the other console makers, so Xbox and just other platforms. platforms. Now, I like that line of thinking. I think it's still pretty stupid to say no to something like this because it doesn't really matter. I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of what I would just circle back to. I would get it to an extent where it's like, well, maybe we don't want that like first party association. Like we're trying to build bridges with Xbox. We want our games everywhere. And then we're going to put Cloud in Astrobot. But the issue there is Crash Bandicoot and Spyro are in Astrobot. A Tomb Raider, dozens of characters that are in Astrobot are not PlayStation exclusive anymore, or they haven't been in a very, very long time, or they just were at the beginning, and then as soon as there were other consoles, they put those games on them as well, right? There's plenty of those games. Metal Gear is a good example, right? So, yeah, I mean, that kind of is just like the ending of the story because you can't really say anything beyond that, right? Like, they don't have an out once you get to that part. I can understand, like, maybe they want to distance themselves or, something like that. But beyond that, I don't really know any other reason why they would say no. And then you have plenty of games that would prove the opposite, right? Where it's like, well, they don't want to be associated. Well, think about Xbox. You know what I mean? Like, Crash and Spyro Naughty Dog freaking made Crash Bandicoot. They literally are the reason that even exists. Then, losing the rights or selling the rights and all that jazz. Eventually, it makes its way to Activision. Eventually, it makes its way to Xbox. And Crash Bandicoot, and by the way, there's a trophy for Crash Bandicoot in the game. So it's like, it's crazy that would even be an idea because you have Crash and Spyro as kind of the antithesis. These are games that have such a rich history on PlayStation, but they're on like the fighting, they're on the other team. They're like actively fighting against it, and they're in the freaking game. So there's really no excuse for Cloud, you know what I mean? And I think it's just a missed opportunity. Like, it's out of the respect thing. I wonder like what it's done. We haven't really talked about that, and I don't think we're ever going to really know, right? Like, when people see the characters from these games, did Astrobot convince people to try out other things? I saw a couple pictures of like Sly Cooper, but I mean, like, I'm in that Sly community, so I see that stuff. I don't know. Maybe people did see certain characters in Astrobot and they pivoted and they decided, okay, I'm going to check that game out. I don't think it's that big of a number, but I do think that number exists. Like, I think it's a real thing. And, I think they're just missing out on that with Cloud. Plus just the respect thing and like the history of it. Not having Final Fantasy feels like a big one, right? When you think back to like the history of PlayStation, I do think the Kingdom Hearts, I do think the Final Fantasy, I think the Square Enix. I think Square Enix was a big part of the origin, kind of the first 10 years or whatever of PlayStation. So I think it was just a big missed opportunity. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.